Good evening and welcome. I'm calling the November 20th, 24 meeting of the Burbank Police Commission to order. And if we can go ahead and start, Ms. Nakamura, with the roll call.
Commissioner Chapman?
Here.
Chair Coons?
Here.
Commissioner Ellman?
Here.
Commissioner Feruzin? Commissioner Jacobian is absent. Commissioner McKenna?
Here.
Commissioner Wenzel?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chapman, if you wouldn't mind leading us in the flag salute. Thank you, Mike. For public comment, an announcement to everyone that's watching online to speak during public and in the audience to speak during public comment. Members of the public may speak for 3 minutes in person in the council chamber, or they may call 818-238-3335. That's 818-238-3335. Members of the public who attend the meeting in chamber will speak first, followed by those phoning in their comments. And we will move to item C, which is commission announcements and reporting out by commissioners and ad hoc subcommittees. And if we can start to my left with Paul.
Nothing at this time, sir.
Thank you, Paul. Layla?
Yeah, I just a quick update that I have received the data from the department and Captain Cremens in particular around active transportation and traffic safety. And so I've started working on that, and we'll hope to agendize that
Appreciate
for a
that.
later meeting.
And for
the end of this meeting.
clarification, is that the traffic and safety ad hoc
Yes,
subcommittee or
yes.
okay, great, thank you.
Not the school. but the-
Thank you, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Mike?
Nothing for
Okay. We'll go over to Ann.
Yes, about 4 weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon, I had the pleasure of doing a ride-along with Sergeant Martha Jimenez, and it was most informative. We never stopped. I was somewhat floored by the number of calls that she had to make. Of course, I was impressed again with performance, impressed again with her ability to deal with individuals, some in distress. It was very, very informative. I got to see a Ripper report, started, had to stop, another call, started again, and I thought, my goodness, the amount of work and the amount of perseverance is commendable. I also noticed, and I know we've talked about this, but I'm not trying to introduce anything or go out of
We're watching
order.
closely, go ahead.
I know you are, but the number of calls that were to Empire, and I know we're all conscious of the holidays and shopping, and we have talked about some areas of the city where there's a more of a need.
Okay.
Might that be something we might consider for another time?
We might. Thank
We
you.
might.
Thank you. Mike?
I don't have much to add. I don't have much to add, but I would like to mention that there is a wreath in front of the police station in honor of Matthew Pravelka. And if you get a chance, tip a hat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, I appreciate that. Just one item. I promised I was going to do some homework, and Mr. Schlossman, I'm glad that you're here. This was a comment that was made last month, and I promised to do some homework on that. And body cam video is actually covered under the Public Records Act, and that's actually one of the items that it's not releasable the way other information is. I need to do some more homework and reading on the Public Records Act itself, but I just wanted to respond to a comment that you had made last month about how body cam video is actually not covered under the Public Records Act. So those are the announcements that we have, and then we'll move on to oral communications. And again, if folks are calling in, they can call 818-238-3335. We will start with folks that are here in the auditorium. And Mr. Schlossman, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. I want to talk about a speaker that appeared here at the last meeting. He introduced himself seeking a job, and I know you folks don't have anything to do with hiring or selection, but he did a good thing. He appeared at the city council, he appeared here, and he talked about his resume, which was very impressive, a lot to be proud of. But then he said something that was very off-putting, and actually, in my opinion, disqualified him from the job. He disqualified himself from consideration for the job. And I wonder if any of you caught it, because he was kind of asking us all to break the law, state law and federal law. He asked to be considered based on his origin, where he's from, his ethnicity. And it kind of, there's a religious component too, because people from this area greatly are of one religion. And these are things that are to be excluded when you consider somebody for any job, anywhere. And it was so subtle, and it didn't sit well with me, and I don't expect any of you folks to respond. You can just consider what I'm saying. But I hope that the decision maker is aware of the way that person was thinking, because it could influence his selections, because he would be in a great position to do hiring and firing. And it's very discriminatory to say I'll be the first, because it excludes people that aren't the first. And that's the very reason why we have state and federal protections, so we won't be thinking like that, and we won't be discriminating and showing favoritism. So please give that some thought privately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Schlossman. Do we have any callers?
No calls pending.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move to commission response to public comments. Do we want to go ahead and go left to right again? Paul, would you like to start?
I'd like to just say to the comment, I understand, I agree with what you're saying, that I hope it's not a consideration, but I think he was addressing our community, and I do hope that we are colorblind and gender blind when we hire the best person. And I am confident that that's what's going to take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Leila, anything?
I'll just say, I believe you're probably referring to the October Police Commission meeting, not the joint meeting, which I wasn't able to be at that meeting.
You can bring the microphone a little closer. There you go.
Yeah. But I just wanted to say, I appreciate you coming up and making the comment. Again, I wasn't here for this comment that you're referring to, but I just want to say I think it is something to celebrate or note when someone is the first, whatever it is, right, to achieve something. Because I think certainly not in every case, but in many cases it is because folks have been excluded in the past, or just haven't had the opportunity to access, to work hard and get those achievements, but through no fault of their own. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, any comments?
I was not physically here for that meeting. That's when I was at Nicole in Tucson. And I did not see it because probably we were having technical difficulties at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Ann?
No, I disagree with Mr. McKenna. I agree with what Mr. McKenna said. I didn't necessarily take it as that strong of a pitch, perhaps.
Thank you.
I go along with the rest here pretty much, I think. I think that he was giving a listing of his qualifications as well as a rounder picture of who he was and part of his character. And I have no problem with what he was issuing. I don't think he was suggesting that we make a decision based on solely on his national heritage. But thank you for your comment. And I'm very glad that you made the other comments too, that he is a very respected person and has a positive history with our department. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schlossman, I also appreciate your comment, and I'm going to go a slightly different direction. I appreciate the fact that we have the First Amendment and we have the right to free speech, and that we've created this public comment period for anybody to pretty much say whatever they wanted to. So that's the first thought. The second is, and I'm just appreciative over the course of my lifetime that we've seen real radical shifts in equity issues, which has come up with the department when we've talked about hiring and we've talked about staffing. It matters not only for the individuals that are selected, but it also matters for the just role models and for paths that people can see that people haven't necessarily, roles that people haven't necessarily filled, including this seat, to be quite honest. So I just appreciate that that's put out there, and I appreciate that we're in a space and a time where we can actually have those comments, those conversations in public. Paul?
One more quick note. I think one of the things that was also important there, and would have been a qualification, is language ability. Because I do think that just like we have a multi-language city, and the ability to communicate in a language that people are most comfortable in, I think is a real asset. So I don't know how he would have brought that into the occasion, into the discussion without bringing that up. So I agree with you. It's a fine line to walk, but I can see both sides of the argument.
Paul, thank you for that. So we're going to go ahead and move on to item F, which is approval of minutes from October 16th, 2024. Paul motions to approve. Do I have a second? I have Mike Chapman seconding. Do we have all in favor? Say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? We have 2 abstentions, which still leaves us with 4, so we're able to approve those minutes. The abstentions are Mike Ellman and Leila Feruzin. Thank you. Moving on to, we got 4, we're good. Moving on to item G, we're getting to our items of business. The first item up is a presentation, discussion, and recommendations, if applicable, on recent trends and activities addressing the issues surrounding domestic violence. And we have Sergeant Marcia Lawfer here with us. Good evening, Sergeant Lawfer.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Lawfer. I'm a sergeant with the Burbank Police Department, and I'm in charge of our Domestic and Family Crimes Unit within our Investigation Bureau. So I'll be speaking to you tonight regarding domestic violence in the city of Burbank. So to start this off, I wanted to show you some statistics over the last 5 years regarding all domestic violence incidents that were reported in the city of Burbank. So starting from the left, we start with the year 2000, and we had 167 incidents. Moving to 2021, we had 233 incidents. And it continues through year-to-date this year, where we have 207 incidents so far. If we compare how many total domestic violence incidents we have, where drugs or alcohol are mentioned as being a part of the domestic violence incident, that's indicated here. So the total domestic violence numbers per year are indicated by the blue bars, and the corresponding drug or alcohol involved incidents are indicated by the red bar. And if you'll notice down below, right above the year indicator, there's a percentage there, and that percentage reflects the amount of incidents for that year that were recorded as having drugs or alcohol involved. So we've stayed pretty steady right around the mid 30% for the last 5 years. One other factor that people often have a question about is the demographics regarding male and female suspects that are arrested for domestic violence. And that's indicated here. For the males, that's indicated by the blue bar, and the females are indicated by the pink bar. And you can see that although the numbers change year by year slightly, the percentage of females to males stays approximately about the same. So I know I gave you this presentation last year, so I wanted to offer you a little bit more information in regards to our response as a department to domestic violence. And some people don't know exactly what we do, so this is just to give an overview of the steps that we take during a domestic violence investigation. This is not going to be all comprehensive, but it's to give you an idea of the steps that we take, a general overview, and if you have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those at the end. So our number one priority when officers respond to a call of domestic violence is to ensure the safety and any medical care that's needed for the victim. That's going to be their number one concern. Also, they're very interested in locating and arresting the suspect if it's deemed worthy, if they determine that domestic violence crime has occurred and a suspect needs to be arrested. That is going to be something that they do, try to find that suspect and arrest them. Also, if the victim would like to have one, the officers will offer to seek out an emergency protective order for the victim. And I spoke about that last year, but as a refresher, it's a form that the officer would fill out on behalf of the victim. They will contact a judge or a magistrate by telephone, give them the facts of the case, and if that judge or magistrate approves the emergency protection order, the officer would complete it with that information on the form. They would provide that copy to the victim, and they would also serve the suspect. So if they've been arrested or if we can locate them, they would be served that emergency protective order. There are many cases where victims feel that although an incident has occurred, they are not in need of a protection order. They're not in fear that the suspect is going to come back and harm them further. So many times we'll ask victims if they would like an emergency protective order, and they will say no, that they do not need one, but it is available to them if they'd like. Another aspect of domestic violence investigations is regarding firearms. If there are firearms at the scene of a domestic violence incident that belong to the suspect, we are directed by law to take temporary custody of those firearms. There is a legal process that the owners of the firearms can go through to request those firearms back, and it's something that's laid out through the California Department of Justice. There's a whole process that they can go through, but we are directed to take custody of those firearms. At the scene of any domestic violence, we provide a resource card to the victims. It looks like this. It's a yellow card, and it has numerous resources on it. It has crisis centers, shelters, and counseling services that would be available to the victim. It provides numbers for the California Victims Resource Center, and also services through LA County. These are not just services that are available through the city of Burbank, but also through the county and the state. In the field, we have these cards available in English, Spanish, and Armenian. But online, this information is also available in Korean and Tagalog. We will give instructions to the parties involved in a domestic violence on how they can obtain a restraining order. So a restraining order, a temporary restraining order, is different than the emergency protective order that we would offer them at the scene. The emergency protective order is good for a very short period of time. The temporary restraining order is something that the court would actually issue. They would actually go to the courthouse and stand before a judge or a magistrate, and they would have the facts of their situation reviewed, And if it was deemed appropriate, the judge or magistrate would issue that temporary restraining order. And that would typically be good for several months. So we will give instructions to victims on how to do that. And also on these cards, there's phone numbers that they can call to get more information regarding that. If there are children involved at the scene of a domestic violence incident, we will notify the Department of Children and Family Services if it's appropriate. So, for instance, there are times where a parent may be holding a small child while they are involved in a domestic violence. Sometimes children may be injured in a domestic violence. Sometimes they are merely present and witnessing it occur. So it puts them on the radar of Department of Children and Family Services, and their department will follow up with that investigation. And then, of course, we will document our investigation in a police report. So those are just the general basic steps of a police investigation into domestic violence. Once that report is generated, it would come upstairs to the Investigations Bureau and it would be assigned to a detective. And then the detective has several steps that they would follow as well. They would contact the victim. Sometimes we are unable to get in touch with our victims or suspects after the fact. We still have the ability to present those cases either to the city attorney's office or the district attorney's office as appropriate for filing consideration. So just because the incident may have concluded on a particular day, it doesn't mean that's the extent of our involvement. We will continue to offer services to the people that are involved, and through the prosecutorial system, there are services available to both the victims and the suspects. If a person receives probation, for instance, for a domestic violence case, they may be ordered to attend what are commonly called domestic violence classes or anger management classes, and that can be part of the court process. So there are services available to both sides which can be offered throughout the process. I've brought up these resources for anybody who may be watching with the QR codes where you can access these websites. The Los Angeles County Domestic Violence Hotline, the LA County Elder Abuse Hotline, and also this other agency called Love is Respect. And that one is geared more towards younger people who are still learning how to control their emotions or be in a relationship, or who may need some guidance in how to have a healthy relationship. So these are just some of the resources that are available, but on the department's website, through Burbank PD, there is a section for victims of crime. And under that section, there are a lot of resources that people can access at any time of day, and they can follow the hyperlinks to these other sites that are available to give them support, advice, counseling. There's crisis centers, other areas that they can reach out to for help in their situation. Are there any questions?
I know I have a few questions. Let's go ahead and, first off, actually thank you, Sergeant Lawfer, for being here this evening. This is something that we've actually calendared on an annual basis. October is a little tricky for us to schedule. October is typically Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so we just really appreciate having this presentation going into the holidays. I do have some questions and some comments, but I wanted to open it up for our other commissioners first. Ann, go ahead.
You answered one of my questions, so thank you. And thank you for your report. Regarding the emergency protection order, I do understand that it's different from a restraining order, temporary or permanent. But how long does somebody have? Let's say, how long does a victim have between the end, perhaps, of that emergency protection order and the need to make sure they get a restraining order?
Well, the temporary restraining order is going to have a definitive end date when it is issued. And our recommendation to the victim is always that they go to the courthouse before that expires to give them time to get the temporary restraining order in place prior to the expiration of the emergency protective order.
How long does an emergency protection order last? Is it a stipulated amount of time and then they have?
Yes,
Okay.
they are typically 7 days. The judge or the magistrate has the ability to give them a different length of time, but typically they are 7 days.
And my other question is, are there legal support groups? Because I could see where the victim of domestic violence might be A, scared to proceed, and 2, just be so overwhelmed that they just can't take that step. Are there legal resources?
Yes, there are. Through LASuperiorCourts.org, there are victim groups, and there is legal assistance for people who may have trouble understanding the process of obtaining a restraining order or the next steps in the legal process. They also have victim advocates that can come and sit with a victim while they're being interviewed. They can walk them through the process and be there to support them. So yes, there are legal assistance available for them.
Terrific. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Other questions that folks have? Mike, go ahead.
I've got a couple. You had a listing of items that happened during the response. Are all of those items officially part of our police policy?
I don't know if every item that I've brought up is specifically delineated within our police policy. Our police policy, which covers domestic violence, is policy number 320, and that is accessible online. I can tell you it's a pretty lengthy document, and it does cover a lot of the processes that we will go through. If I can just go back to
Sure.
that slide. Yes, I can tell you, all of those are included in our policy.
Good.
I'm sorry, that took me a moment.
No, appreciate that.
A minor point. You said if there was a gun involved. Was it more than that? If there was any weapon involved, that would be confiscated and arrested?
Do you mean like if they had a knife or sword on the
knife,
wall? Okay. No, that is not included under this law. I've provided the penal code there. It's 1,800-250. I'm sorry, 18,250 of the California Penal Code. And that specifically talks about gun violence and the ability, the legal authority of the police officers to confiscate firearms at the scene of a domestic violence. And there are other circumstances in which they would also confiscate them. If there's a violation of a domestic violence restraining order and there are guns present at that scene, they would also confiscate them there. So, but they're all typically related around the domestic violence incident.
Domestic violence calls can be very emotional on a lot of people's. It also can create a threat situation for our officers. I remember years ago, one of our officers got hit with an iron frying pan. Have we had a decrease in threats against the police during their calls, domestic violence calls?
I did not look for those statistics specifically, excuse me. However, as a point of training and knowledge, we have always been taught that domestic violence situations are among the most violent that we will encounter due to the fact that people are highly emotional. They may be angry. There may be weapons present. So we know that when we go on those types of calls that we are potentially encountering a very dangerous situation. So we do take precautions as we can in these types of calls. Some of the things that we might do before we arrive at a domestic violence call, dispatch will find out if we've had prior calls for service at that residence or with the reporting party that is making the phone call. In certain circumstances, they might have time to do a records check and let us know if that person has firearms that are registered to them. And then when we approach, if we're able to, sometimes we'll make a phone call and ask them to step outside. We will listen before we approach the door to door knock it. We'll see if we can hear noise coming from inside, active fighting, anything crashing down. So we do our best to remain safe in that situation, but our job as the police is to handle the situation and make sure that the people are safe and that the incident, the crime, has stopped. So we know that that's our job, but we try to approach it as safely as we can.
I know that we're working on recent trends in domestic violence. One thing I was looking at the charts that you had over the different years, and it started just when COVID came in. Were those numbers lower pre-COVID?
So I did it for a number of 5 years. In my previous presentation, I had a couple years prior to that. I don't have those exact numbers available for you right now, but what I can tell you is that the numbers during COVID, so 2020, if everybody remembers, COVID started in March. That's when we started having the lockdowns, March of 2020. So our reported numbers of domestic violence for that year were slightly lower than the previous year and the year following. And I can't say if actual incidents of domestic violence were down or if it was merely the reported cases of domestic violence that were down. I don't know why they were down, but the reported cases were slightly lower that year.
Last question, honest. Again, we're looking at recent trends. Is there anything that's specifically new in the last couple of years that we should be looking at? And are there any recommendations that you might suggest that we make, that the department makes?
As far as recent trends, social media is a big factor in, I would say, all aspects of crime, and that does not bypass the crime of domestic violence. There is an aspect of social media and internet use that does sometimes affect people who have been in a relationship, and that would be revenge porn. That is where people may have photos or videos that would be considered private of a person that they were in a prior relationship with, and when they break up with that person or become angry, those videos or pictures begin to be posted or sent to that person's family or workplace. And that is something that is relatively new over the last few years, and it is most definitely a crime. And that is something that we've encountered on a more frequent basis. I wouldn't say that it's an overwhelmingly high number of cases, but it is something that has come across our desks. In regards to ways to combat domestic violence, I think education is probably our biggest ally. I know that we have the Domestic Violence Task Force here in Burbank and agencies like Zonta that reach out and try to help and educate people. When we contact people out in the field, we try to just flood them with information regarding resources that are available, hotlines, crisis centers, counseling that's available, just trying to make sure that sometimes people aren't comfortable talking to the police, and we get that. But we want to give them something tangible that after we leave, they have a phone number or an idea planted in their head that there is help out there. They're not truly alone. So I think educating people is probably one of our biggest allies. We can't control the outcome of prosecutions within the county. We're here just to do our job, which is merely if the crime appears to have happened and there's enough basis to justify the arrest, that's what we're going to do. And we will do as complete and thorough an investigation as we can. But the decision to actually prosecute or what happens in the back end of that case, that is in the hands of the city prosecutor's office or the district attorney's office, and we don't have a part in that. But our part is to try and do the most comprehensive investigation and gather all of the facts that are available, whether they show that someone committed a crime or to show that in fact a crime did not occur. That's our job, and that's what we try to do. So as far as trying to mitigate domestic violence, those areas would be my top two.
Good. Thank you very much for your presentation this evening.
Thank you,
I
Mike.
think there may be some more questions.
Yeah, we'll just keep working our way down. So I'm just really appreciative of the presentation and want to lift up how important this work is. It would be great if we didn't need a domestic violence task force anywhere, but we're talking about trends that are probably unfortunately going to continue. I appreciate you bringing up and acknowledging how violent these situations are, both of you, and how dangerous this is to law enforcement. I think it was just a few years ago that was it Alhambra or El Monte? I can't remember which city it was. There were two No, it was local. It was local. It was either Alhambra or El Monte. Two officers were ambushed and unfortunately died in the line of duty in responding to a domestic violence report, which was and unfortunately it was an ambush. So I'm just very much aware of that. Also, Mike, to your comment, I wanted to lift up that I know that during the pandemic, child abuse reporting had dropped, and we know that the rate of child abuse did not drop. But the problem is that because of the pandemic, people were out of sight, out of mind, and so reporting had dropped, and there's belief that happened with domestic violence as well. I would be curious, do you know offhand if the domestic violence numbers that you provided here, are those numbers available for prior years online?
They would be by pulling up this meeting for prior years.
Okay.
And in this presentation, they would be available there. I don't know if
Perfect.
they're accessible anywhere else.
I appreciate that, and that's going to come to a recommendation I'm going to have later on when we get to the end. Couple of questions for you. How many when you offer to assist with emergency protection orders, this is just a ballpark estimate. How often do people take the officers up on that to receive that assistance?
I would be guessing if I tried to give you a number, but I can tell you it's pretty frequent.
Okay.
I would guess probably about half of the time.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
purely a guess.
Okay.
I don't have those numbers.
Which is good, and it's good with the other numbers that we can guess at those as well. How often are firearms are encountered and taken into custody by the department on these calls?
Again, I don't have those specific numbers, but those, it is fairly regularly. I would estimate maybe 20 to 25% of the time.
Okay. The resource card that you provided, how often does that get updated or reviewed for the resources that are on it? I'm wondering if there might be a date on it.
Well, this was updated in February of 2022.
Okay.
So
Fantastic.
I know that they do go through these fairly regularly on a schedule and try to update any information on them. Luckily, most of these agencies are long-standing agencies where they're likely not to change their contact information, but this is updated as of 2022.
I appreciate that. One more question for you, and actually, let me jump back real quick. With the firearms temporary custody, is that part of the gun violence restraining order, or is that a separate process?
So that's two separate prongs of this issue. We do not always obtain a gun violence restraining order when we're confiscating weapons at the scene of a domestic violence. Excuse me. A gun violence restraining order can be petitioned for during the incident of domestic violence, and that would be something that would be done most likely by a detective when this case is assigned. It's something that can also be sought out by an immediate family member, an employer, if they have concerns about someone. It's something that they can also seek out. So it's not always something that has to be done during the course of a domestic violence and with the police, but most commonly it is.
Okay, appreciate that. Last question I have, and if you can walk us through this. If a temporary restraining order is violated, can you walk us through the process of what does that process look like if someone were to violate a temporary restraining order?
Okay, that's actually quite common, unfortunately, where a person will be granted a temporary restraining order and the person that is restrained will violate that order. If we are able to get to the scene while that person is still there and we can confirm that the temporary restraining order is valid, then that person would be placed under arrest. It's considered a misdemeanor, so they would be arrested and they would be brought back to the jail. There are multiple times, however, when we will get the call that a restraining order was violated. It might be something, for instance, a person was looking at their home surveillance camera and noticed that the restrained person walked up to their door and left something on their doorstep, and they really didn't have any contact with them, but that in itself is technically a violation of the restraining order. In those incidents where we don't get there and find the person in violation of the restraining order, we will do our investigation and we would submit that case to the city attorney's office for their review, and then they would decide if that case would be prosecuted or not.
Appreciate that. Sergeant Lawford, thank you. I know I'll have some recommendations in a little bit, but I want to keep going down to my colleagues here. Mike, do you have anything?
How often do you run into the victim refuses to press charges?
That's actually quite common. When at the scene of a report, more often than not, victims will be in shock. They may be in physical pain. They are sometimes more willing to provide a statement to the police of what occurred. And then when the police take that initial report and a day or two has gone by and the detective then reaches out to that person, sometimes we see a drop-off in the number of people that are still willing to talk to the police or cooperate with that investigation. In certain crimes, that does have an effect on the ability to prosecute a case. With our domestic violence cases, regardless if we have their cooperation or not, we will continue with our investigation, whether that means talking to witnesses or going and obtaining video camera footage, reviewing the photographs and the police body-worn camera from that night and taking still shots of that to provide to the district attorney or the city attorney. We will go ahead and complete our investigation and go ahead and submit that report. So we always try to gain the cooperation of the victim, but it's actually quite common where they will stop talking to us or cooperating with the investigation.
Thank you. The resource card. Those phone numbers, how many times will a live person pick up at 2 in the morning?
I know that there are some here which are 24-hour hotlines. 1, 2, 3. There's 6 numbers on here which are listed as being 24-hour hotlines. I have not called them myself at 3 a.m. in the morning, so I can't say for sure. But but they are listed as being 24 hours. Some of them are bilingual.
Okay. If the perpetrator of the domestic violence is not on scene, and you haven't found them yet, is there any housing or anything offered to the victims so they're not left at the house, at the scene?
So that is actually managed on a case-by-case basis. If there is concern that the victim is in danger, we will usually offer to call someone to come and be with them. We can offer to bring them to the police department until they're able to find someone that they feel safe going with. Oftentimes, we will transport that victim to another location of their choosing. There are times where someone is in a very dire situation where they may not have access to safe housing. They may not even have a car that they can get in and drive away from the scene. So there are circumstances where we will offer, there are resources even on this card like Home Again. There are some centers that will provide temporary housing. There are shelters for victims of domestic violence. So we do have some resources that we can assist a victim in trying to get to a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certainly circumstances where the alleged suspect is not on scene and that person may be scared of them coming back. So those are the circumstances in which we would utilize those services.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Leila?
Yeah, thank you as well. I appreciate you being here again with us. So 3 questions. I think they're maybe quick questions, but in terms of, I think we've touched on it a little bit, the underreporting. Do you have a general idea of what % of domestic violence incidents are reported? I know during COVID it was kind of a whole other thing too, but just in general, I'm guessing
There really wouldn't be any
Not
way for me
reported.
to estimate that because we know only what's reported to us.
Okay. And then as far as the restraining orders, protective orders, those kinds of things, just for people who are listening, or if, anyone, encounters somebody who's in that situation, unfortunately, is that something people can do at the Burbank courthouse, or they would need to go to a different courthouse?
Yes, so they
Is that
can
local?
obtain the temporary restraining orders at the Burbank courthouse. If their case is assigned to Pasadena courthouse, which is another common courthouse that services our cases, they could also obtain one there. But most times they can obtain it through the Burbank courthouse.
Okay. And then last question, as far as the firearms, I'm sure the law, I don't know how specific it is, but if there's a domestic violence suspect and they do have a firearm, but it's not at the location, or the scene where the incident occurred, like maybe it's in their car or maybe it's at another residence, if, those kind of things, would you be able to, inquire about those and find out, based on what's registered and confiscate those as well? Or is it really just only ones at the scene where?
So I can tell you that the law states that it's regarding firearms that are at the scene of a domestic violence. There are certain circumstances in which, regardless of the location of a firearm, if the alleged suspect owns a firearm and they are either convicted of domestic violence or a restraining order is issued against them, they would then have to surrender those weapons by law. In a circumstance where we arrive at the scene of a domestic violence and we have knowledge that this person owns a firearm, either because they've told us or the other involved party has told us that, or we've done a records check and found that out, we are going to ask, hey, where's your firearm? Where's your gun? And if they say, it's in my truck, we're going to ask, do you mind if I go take a look? And oftentimes, when we suggest to the person, hey, I know you're heated right now, this is not a good situation, I want to offer to you that we can hold on to your firearm until things settle down. There are many times where people will agree to allow that to take place. The firearm is not taken as evidence of any crime. It's not being confiscated for any reason. It's held in a safekeeping function. And there are times where people will recognize that they're not in a good situation, and they will sometimes allow us to take it, even though the law doesn't specifically say that's what we shall do. So there's a few different ways that we can approach those situations.
Thank you.
Paul?
Thank you for your very thorough, very disturbing presentation. Firstly, your comment about weapons other than firearms, is that left up to the judgment of the officer? I mean, I would think that in this day and age, there are so many other things that are deadly that someone could have in their possession. And I would just think that we would afford our officers the judgment, called the opportunity to do that. Is that possible, or is that beyond their scope?
We have to operate within the parameters of the law, and the law is pretty specific that it's firearms that we are allowed to confiscate at these scenes. Now, if there's a situation where someone has another type of weapon and perhaps they've threatened the person with it, or we can reasonably justify that that weapon is a threat, then there could be circumstances where we would take it. So I won't say that we don't, but I can tell you what the law says, and that's specifically firearms.
So you're saying if it's not related, firearms are the only thing you can take. If it is related, it extends to anything that's involved.
Potentially.
Potentially.
It's on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Are there certain, I mean, we're all obviously thinking of the Super Bowl, but there's events that take place that obviously make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Is there anything that we can do about that as a community in the way of sort of awareness? And I mean, like I said, am I wrong? Super Bowl Sunday is a day that you get extra calls on this?
I think you're on the right track with the public approval of mass drunkenness may increase domestic violence. I think that's safe to say. There are certain holidays that we tend to maybe be on the lookout more for people driving under the influence, and also just preparing for the eventual domestic violence incidents. And sometimes those involve families getting together on holidays like Christmas or Thanksgiving, or it could be your typical celebratory holiday like Cinco de Mayo or Super Bowl Sunday. Domestic violence in general is one of those crimes that spans across every race, every economic threshold. It's not specific to a certain type of person or a certain level of society. It's something that can affect all people. So I wouldn't be able to give you a specific on what's going to trigger it. It really could be anything.
And last but not least, it's unfortunately, it's not uncommon to hear of someone going back after having a restraining order and committing a horrendous crime. Do you ever feel that a restraining order becomes more of an inciting factor as opposed to a negator?
In my opinion, having a restraining order is what allows us to then go out and place someone under arrest for violating it.
It's just a tool then?
It's a tool that allows us to prevent further interactions from occurring. If a person doesn't have that restraining order and the prior alleged suspect keeps coming home or coming to their work, it takes a while to establish another crime such as stalking or harassing phone calls. But if they've had an incident and they obtain a temporary restraining order and the alleged suspect violates that restraining order by calling them or showing up, it gives us a tool to prevent that behavior and possibly start a judicial process where they might have to then possibly go to some classes or get some court-ordered restraint. Yes.
Thank you
So it's
very
not
much.
a perfect tool, but it is a tool that we use.
Thank you, Paul. Lily, you have one more question?
Sorry, one more question. There's kind of maybe a legal definition, right, of domestic violence, and then there's, emotional abuse, financial, abuse, like, and control and things like that. Do you all get calls about those types of things that don't involve a physical kind of aspect? And I'm guessing, a lot of those resources on your card also help with those kind of situations, but does the department have any role, or is it just kind of like, referring folks to services and those, if you do receive calls of that nature?
We do. We do receive calls regarding those different types of interactions. And sometimes we'll get a call of possible domestic violence, and when we arrive, we can't determine that any crime occurred. It could be a situation where the couple was loudly arguing, but there wasn't any physical violence. They don't have any injuries. We can't establish a crime occurred. But if we respond out there, we're going to take a report. It won't be a crime report, so to speak, but it would be documented under a miscellaneous investigation. It at least starts the process of getting them some assistance or some help, providing them with that information card, giving them some tools to use. In regards to financial abuse or other types of harassment, oftentimes that will fit into a different classification of crime, not necessarily domestic violence. But if there is financial abuse between people that used to be involved in a romantic relationship, that might be handled by our fraud department, depending on the type of financial abuse. If it's name calling or emotional abuse, that's, I'm going to say on its face, that doesn't fit the criteria for a crime that we would be able to enforce. But if we are present at the scene where someone has requested us to be there, and we can determine that there is some sort of domestic relationship, we're still going to provide the information that I've talked about tonight.
Sergeant Lothrop, thank you. Before we let you go, a quick question. I wanted to make a recommendation. Unless the department is already doing this, I'm wondering if we want to make, I'd like to make a recommendation that we look into, we've had conversations about posting elements from our meetings on social media. It's pretty easy to grab something off of YouTube from a specific point in time and then be able to post that. I'd like to, unless the department's already doing this, I'd like to make the recommendation that we pursue that. Outside of this meeting to publicize that. Just getting a comment that you'd made earlier, the importance about getting the information out there and whatever we can do to just get the information out there so people have access to it, which might be the difference between someone being comfortable in contacting the police department for assistance in a situation like that. I think that's something that we could do.
I agree 100%, especially like with the access card. Slightly off topic, my wife was a first grade teacher. A couple years ago, she comes home the first day of school in tears because one of her students literally listed their address as homeless. And she said, how can that be? I called Albert on I think it was a Tuesday, and he apologized because he wouldn't be able to help the people till Thursday. And she was like, in 2 days, you can help them, and no one else has been able to help them. And she was dumbfounded that she didn't have that type of resource card. So I think the ability to get the resource card, the availability of it, the knowledge of it out there is priceless. And I'm not sure exactly where you're going with it, but I support the idea.
Great. Ann?
I would add, yes, totally support you. I think totally support the idea of physical resource cards and getting them to, say, urgent care centers in the city, school counselors, but getting them out to where people, may go to even avoid a police matter?
That's actually a pretty common thing that is done. If you notice when you go into a hospital, in the exam rooms, in the restrooms, they will have notices saying, "Are you a victim of domestic violence?" and provide a hotline number. On the city website, as well as the Burbank Police Department website, there's a lot of information on resources. And then we try to supplement that by handing these out to the people that are actually being affected by these cases that we interact with. So that actually is a really good way to handle that, or way to approach that, and it is being done in numerous hospitals and bathrooms.
And,
Yes, hospitals, I've seen it, and yes, thank you so much.
and I think, earlier in the presentation, there was actually QR codes there as well, and links from the Burbank Police Department to access this resources. So a couple of different recommendations we have. One is to get this thing posted, this presentation posted. A second recommendation is to actually get materials out to things like hospitals and clinics. Let's start with the first one. Are folks comfortable with supporting getting this posted online and social media?
As long as the sergeant is.
That would be up to my chief.
Okay. Well, the question specifically, is this something that the department would want to do, or is this something that the commission could do as well?
So probably both. Let me cross-check with Lieutenant Green.
Sure.
As far as what we have in place and what we also can do to enhance the educational process.
Okay.
For the human trafficking at airports, bathrooms, there's signage. So let's be smart about this so that we can reach out to the right groups and run out over it, so we don't become white noise with the
Right.
other educational efforts.
Okay.
So we'll cross-staff with Derek, and we can get back to you at the next meeting.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Mike?
I know things are internet now, but is there a possibility that we can include a flyer with our city utilities bill? Water, your electric bill. Can we put a flyer in there that wouldn't cost anything more for the city, I don't think, except to stuff the envelope?
So I think that's actually something that we could pursue. We've done
Yeah.
that before with
Yeah.
other issues as well, so I don't think it's much a direction to the chief or the department, but that is something that we as a commission could pursue. Is that something that you might be willing to look into and follow
Yeah.
up with
Sure.
Burbank Water and Power? Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that.
You know, a lot
Mike?
of people get e-bills, no longer get the
You're right.
mail.
You're right. And with those e-bills, there are attachments, and there's sometimes information that comes with that.
Some people will scroll, some people.
That'll happen. But Michael, go ahead and pursue that and see if we can do that. Any other recommendations? All right, Sergeant Lawfer, thank you so much for your presentation
Could
this
I
evening.
just stop you for a second?
Sure.
I want you to look at Sergeant Lawfer, because on Sunday, it will be Lieutenant Lawfer.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Soon to be Lieutenant Lawfer.
Thank you.
All right, next item that we have up, it's item G2, which is a debrief of commissioners' attendance at the NACOL conference, to include a report out by Detective Kiles on her presentation regarding managing calls for service related to mental health. And if it's okay with everyone here, can we start with Detective Kiles' presentation first? And then, Mike, we can go to your report out? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Detective Kiles, welcome back.
Hi. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Detective Anisha Kiles. I was originally with our mental health evaluation team and just recently been assigned to the Domestic and Family Crimes Unit. So in October, I had the opportunity to represent the Burbank Police Department and the City of Burbank at the NACOL conference in Tucson, Arizona. So basically, NACOL is the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And the goal of NACOL is to basically work with law enforcement, jails, and prisons to have them become more transparent, more accountable, and more responsive to the needs of their communities. And so they work with other independent and civilian oversight teams. So the NACOL conference agenda, it included presentations regarding preventing and reducing prison violence, public order policing and a modern approach, the prosecutor and police oversight seeking alignment, as well as 27 additional other breakout presentations. The Burbank Met team was asked to participate in a panel by OIR, which is an independent police oversight committee, and they asked us to talk about the topic of law enforcement interactions with persons experiencing behavioral health crises and looking at alternative response models. So our presentation basically talked about why alternative response models are important. We looked at different alternative response models around the nation, and then Burbank Met, we did an overview of how we do things in the city of Burbank, and then Commander LaFrance, he talked about CSET from Eureka PD, how they run their community outreach program. And then OIR basically talked about the role of oversight and how it's important to work with existing programs in the nation. And that's it.
Detective, thank you so much. We will, before we take any questions to you, I wanted to open it up to Mike, and I was just whispering to him on the side that you kind of took him off the hook a little bit for some of the presentation. But Mike, go ahead and continue with what you've got.
Well, firstly, I would say Detective Kyles at the conference was a rock star. Burbank should be very proud. We are so ahead of the curve nationwide in mental health that her presentation was one of the last ones on the first day of the conference and had one of the biggest audiences. And after that, so many people from other departments approached myself and Romick asking about our program. We should be very proud of what we're doing and the presentation that Detective Kyles did. I guess it's my turn now.
Yep.
Well, the conference ran from October 13th to the 17th, and basically there were two training tracks. One training track was involving and engaging stakeholders, which were basically people who are on police commissions, and the other track was about jail and prison oversight. And you were able to flip-flop between the two different tracks depending on your interests. I would have to say this was a very informative and rewarding conference to attend. There are so many different levels of law enforcement in this country, it's amazing. And some of the seminars that I attended was law enforcement interactions with persons experiencing behavioral health crisis, exploring alternative response models, which was Detective Kyles. Transparency, a bridge to trust collaboration. The intersection of criminal defense litigation and police oversight. Monitoring the health care provided to people in custody. That was very interesting because in previous presentations that the police department did here in our commission meetings, we brought up the subject of biometric wristbands. And in so many other incarceration situations, there were things that happened in jail which probably the wristbands would have caught. It never would have occurred. So generally, just to sum it up, it was very rewarding and really opened my eyes to everything that's going on. One of the things that kind of really blew my mind is I went to a presentation from the Federal Department of Justice on cases that they are pursuing right now. And one of the things I just couldn't believe that federal government is suing the state of Louisiana because incarcerated people aren't always being released on the release date. They're forgotten in the system. So it just was very informative and interesting, and I thank the city and the police department for making it available for Romick and myself. Thank you.
Mike, thank you for that. Romick's not able to be here this evening, but he did send some comments that he wanted me to share. He said specifically, please let Anisha Officer Kyle, or Detective Kyles know that I was very impressed by her presentation. What impressed me the most was the reception it received. There was a line of people eager to speak with her, curious about how a program like like MET could be implemented in their own local agencies. Programs like MET demonstrate the future of policing and its potential to reshape community engagement. So thank you again for your participation in that. I do also want to, before we open it up to comments and everything, I also do want to point out that I think there were two conferences going on in Arizona at the time. One of them was NACOL. The other one, there was something I learned about called Crisis Con that was taking place in Phoenix. So I'm guessing that you're probably going to get an invitation to Crisis Con at some point in the future. So just be aware of that. I wanted to open it up to questions that the commissioners had. Paul, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for being here, because as you've heard me say here before, when I got off the plane from Chicago a year ago, I immediately called James. As Mike pointed out, everything that they went over, I had seen pieces of that already implemented in Burbank. There were a couple of things like the vehicle that we now have that weren't, and I came back and I spoke to the chief offline, and he was bait, it's in the works, wait, you're gonna see it. But I just wanted to say that what I was, even early on, because some people would get up and they would tell the same story. The seminar could be about orange and they're going to tell a story about blue because they want to tell their story in front of the microphone. And my initial feeling on that was that it was out of place, and then I realized what I was witnessing was trauma. These people were just so traumatized and they were begging for a place to be heard. And I think the people of Burbank need to know how lucky we are that we have your resources and your initiative, that you continue your education in this, and you're not just doing your job. This is a passion. Finally, I would like to say, are we doing anything? What do we do long term for the trauma? Someone gets through, I don't know whether it's 30, 60, 90 days, and then the trauma sticks. I mean, I obviously I've been told I have PTSD from my combat experience, and there are people that say get over it. And at some point in time, I'd like to say you just can't, that's not the way it works. And I'm sure it's the same thing with the trauma you deal with. Do we have long-term resources for our citizens?
Yeah, so there's always long-term resources available to anybody that is willing to accept them. And sometimes it does get to the point where, that resource for them isn't working anymore, and then we have to talk about like navigating to a different type of resource, or finding something that will suit them for what they're currently going through. So we're always open to figuring out like what type of resource that individual needs at that current moment.
I know this has been mentioned out of the meetings, and I apologize because this is just mental health, but do we have some of those same resources on a non-identifiable level for our officers?
Yes. So we currently have like our peer support group. We have other resources that have been made available to us, that if an officer does need assistance, they can accept that assistance and nobody has to know about it. Because I think a lot of times in law enforcement, we are scared to come forth, if there are some concerns. So it's just making sure that it's available to them and that they know that they can actually use this without any repercussions.
Yeah, the bottom line is I can't say thank you enough, because my experience with this has been, it needs to be improved. Thank you. But Burbank is, as Mike pointed out, Burbank is setting the standard.
Thank you, Paul. Other comments that folks have? Let's go Mike and then Ann.
Sure. Good. Thank you for your presentation. And it sounded like when you were there, you were a leader. Thank you.
You're good.
That you were a leader in people asking you a lot of questions, what we're doing. And I think that we can, again, thank you for your service in that area, and also to the chief for his support over the years. It's been a long time trying to develop the program, I know. Even though you were the one giving out information, was there anything new that you saw or heard that may be important to our department? Maybe some changes that we could make or add?
Yeah, so actually working with Commander LaFrance from Eureka PD, it was kind of amazing how much resources they dedicate to their city. It's a population of a little over 25,000, but they have 6 officers / rangers and a sergeant committed to helping improve homelessness and mental health, and just realizing how much they improve and rely on their community partners to help make the changes that they need. So just taking from that is that we really need to work more with our community partners within the city of Burbank versus just like county.
Fair statement. Fair statement. Ann, go ahead.
Thank you.
Mike? Okay. Ann,
Actually-
go ahead.
Most of my question, but I was directing it to Mike and to Detective Kyles. Was there anything at that conference that you walked away with and saying, we've got to work on that? This has to be next on our agenda. So similar question, but I included you.
I will have to say, we're ahead of the curve on just about everything. There are some departments so far behind. It's unbelievable. Oh, am I on?
You're on.
Anyways, but it was very interesting. I had a very interesting conversation with a fellow commissioner from the city of Detroit, who I knew from a previous conference. And it's interesting when a major city like Detroit has asked small-town Burbank questions about how we're doing things, and we seem to be ahead of the ball. It was very interesting that I think it was just, you should see what other departments are doing to really appreciate what's going on here.
Well, was there anything that was like, oh my goodness, we have to do this, or wouldn't it be great if we had this? Was there anything like that?
I think just listening to some of the oversight committees, how they talk about data and keeping track of incidences, I think that was kind of important. Specifically, like certain data that maybe I personally didn't think about, but overall, leaving the conference, I felt proud to be working for Burbank Police Department, knowing that we are taking like extra initiatives to be transparent, and of course, there's always room for improvement, but we are taking those steps to be transparent and open.
Great, thank you again.
Leila, did you have anything? No, it was okay. It was okay. Excellent. I just want to thank you for the presentation. Ideally, if our communities had all of the resources that we needed, we wouldn't need law enforcement or a public mental health system either, for that matter. But it's going to be there, and it's going to be continuing. Grateful to have you doing this work. Real quick question for you: how's the doctorate going?
It's moving along.
Good. Okay. Hopefully, it's not putting you on the spot at all, but
No.
we're cheering for you along the way. So, thank you so much for your presentation, Detective Kyles. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to item G4, which is the review and update of the annual dashboarding calendar or of topics of interest. I'll go ahead and start this up. I've got I only have an electronic copy. I don't have one to share. Oh, we've got physical copies here? You have one? Okay, that's okay. Mike, you've got one.
I have one.
And Mike's excellent. People have copies. You're all rock stars. I appreciate you for that. I'm bringing mine up right now. So the purpose, there we go. I appreciate, it's okay. The purpose of this has helped us kind of stay focused throughout the year and identify topics that we want to make sure don't fall off the table and that we address annually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly, for the audience, I'm going to go ahead and briefly go through what the calendar is right now. And what we need to do is, our task is to determine, one, do we want to continue with having an annual calendar? And two, are there any changes to the annual calendar? What would we like to see in there? This calendar does not agendize items. We actually had to agendize having this discussion. The calendar is only a guide. So what we do from month to month, we're not locked in, but we actually have to go through the process of agendizing each item for the meeting that it's going to be taking place. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start with where we are right now. November, we typically want to address domestic violence and gang activity. December is traditionally dark. January, we address DUI enforcement and military equipment report, and the military equipment report, which we, by the way, really appreciate the partnership with the department around that. In February, it's homeless engagement, and then there's a military equipment community engagement meeting that takes place. In March, we typically talk about equity in hiring and advancement. April, it's Communications Centers Week, and we focus on the Communications Center. May, we get a mental health update to coincide with May is Mental Health Month. In June, we do a year in review. That's kind of our self-evaluation on what we've covered. In July, we talk about school and bike and traffic safety, and that is to coincide with the beginning of the school year. And in August, we have the election of new officers. Jumping back to September, we traditionally have our joint meeting with City Council and the OIR report presentation. And then October, we traditionally have addressed pedestrian safety. So I want to open this up for discussion. Are there items on there that people don't think should be on there? Are there items that should be moved around? And are there items that people would like to see added? Let me start with this. Is the calendar helpful? So I'm seeing consensus around. Paul?
Yeah, I don't think you start any journey without a map. And I think this is at the very least, it's a roadmap. As you pointed out, it's not a written in stone.
Okay.
But it gives us guidelines. I think it also gives our department guidelines on what to expect us to be, what to prepare, what to expect us to ask, instead of coming out of left field, which we so often seem to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it is just a guideline with that, so I appreciate that. So it looks like we do have consensus around keeping the annual calendar. Nobody vehemently disagreed. I appreciate that. So Mike, did you were not vehemently disagreeing, but
I'm not crazy about it.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I think you got to think, what's on the mind of the residents of
Right.
Burbank? What are they seeing on the news?
Right.
And you talk to the people, and they will still talk about catalytic converter, theft, smash and grabs, the Empire Center, and that it's not reflected on here.
I agree 100% with you, Mike, but the value of this is there's one or two items in every category. We never cover one or two items a month. So this leaves plenty of room for what you're talking about are the timely items.
I'm just saying
to
it's
be brought up.
tilted, not in the direction I just mentioned.
So one of the options is to add things to this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
what would you like to see, and where would you like to see it added?
Well, I would say that, unfortunately, we have a dark meeting in December.
I guess theoretically we could open that up, but,
Yeah. But I mean-
everybody's groaning right now. We won't go there.
No, but I'm not saying that. That's not my idea. My idea is January, we can see year-end results
Year-end results for crime.
for crime, basically, what happened in the previous year.
So I would actually ask a question of the department around that. When does crime data for a calendar year typically become finalized?
So we do it monthly, and Derek may be able to weigh in as far as when we have the entire year, but we try to be pretty good stewards of getting the crime stats on the website. That also
Right.
includes traffic. So Derek, am I missing something?
No, there is a delay, but it's not significant. So we just posted October of 2024. So at the conclusion of the calendar year, give us about a month and a half, and we should have.
I would think
Final
March
reports up.
might be a good month.
Okay. And I want to add to that with what the department's bringing up. So there's the data availability on the website. And we've talked about this before, that we really want to make sure that we take responsibility personally to review that data. We got some great tools last month around that. There's two pieces. There's when's the data available, and are we asking the department to make a presentation on it? So I heard you say month and a half gets the data available. If we're asking the department for a presentation, is it fair to ask for development of a presentation in that same time frame? So with what you were just saying a moment ago, Mike, you were thinking about March. And if we were to do this in March, that would actually give the department, again, we'd have to agendize
Right.
it, but it would also give the department plenty of time to prepare data for the prior calendar year.
And I would say March, looking at what we have right now, is a light month.
Okay, okay. So it sounds like the recommendation is to add crime,
Crime statistics
review of crime statistics in March of every year.
for the preceding year.
For the preceding year, alongside equity and hiring and advancement. Does that sound like something folks are interested in?
I think yes, and I think it's at a good time because if Lieutenant's telling us that it culminates in November, December, it gives them time to prepare a report. It's not something that has to be done on the spur of the moment.
So I'm seeing folks nod in agreement, and I'm not seeing anybody argue vehemently. Mike?
The only thing, does the department give a report currently to like the counselor, the city manager about crime annually? I'm wondering if we can do this all at the same time and make it easier for you guys.
Not really. I mean, I do bi-monthly meetings with the CM and the ACM, and if there's something notable with crime, I will share that with them. For city council, typically it's a notable incident, but as far as crime stats for the following month, year, whatever, that generally has been asked.
Okay, appreciate that. The one ask I would have, I'm seeing consensus to add that. The one ask I would have is that we do our homework to come to the table reviewing the information that's already readily available on the website, as opposed to just asking the department to regurgitate that information. Does that sound fair? So it sounds like we're going to go ahead and add review of crime statistics in March. Mike, you're hesitant?
No, I'm not
Okay.
hesitant at all. Green light.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is add perhaps one more, and I don't know if the rest of the commission is in favor, is there is an annual report. We went over it the first time last year, the RIPA, which is Racial Identity Profiling Advisory, done
Yep.
by the state.
Yep.
The report is dated January 1st of the year. For example, January 1st of 2025 is coming up.
Right.
That's the date on the report. The actual time that it's covering is 23,
Okay.
January 1st to December 31st of 23. So it's like a year-old data.
Okay.
However, it's the only data we have, and we can look at it and just review it, yeah? I'm not
Okay.
sure that it needs to be a 4-hour meeting, but we should acknowledge that it's done and see how it impacts our departments.
Okay. When would that be? When would be a good time to review that? Do you have a
I was thinking
recommendation?
March, but nah, I'm not so sure anymore. I mentioned that it comes down on January 1st. Do you know when it's actually released out? Is it like a month later, or?
I don't, and they don't run a tight calendar. So I'll, Sherry, if you'll cue me up, we'll cross-staff with Lieutenant Brimway to get the projected release of that report and email you that information.
Okay.
At this time, thank you. At this time, can we maybe, to be announced, but put it in March, but we can adjust it?
Here's what I was going to suggest, so that we're the agenda item's open to be able to add things right now to do it, but it doesn't mean that it's actually agendized until we agendize it. So if we were to add it to a month, that's a placeholder that would remind us, we can then agendize it for that month. We could agendize it for a month before or a month after. Would it be okay to put it under April?
Sure.
April?
Chair,
Okay.
just letting you know,
Yeah.
the last report, I have it on my desktop. The annual report came out on January 1st, 2023. So
The-
I don't, not sure if they prepare it like in 2022 and prepare and publish
Right.
in 23, but it's dated January 1st, 2023.
So it may actually be it'll become available much sooner. I just,
In January.
yeah,
Or it's dated last year.
I'm not sure what the date of it
Yeah.
It was dated January
Yeah, it's a long time.
So with the publication date, I'd like to just make sure that if we're asking for a presentation and do a discussion on it, that there's plenty of time to be able to review the report. And if the department is putting together a presentation on it, that they have time to prepare for that as well. Leila, tell us what you're thinking.
No, I was just gonna say, I didn't know if Commissioner Chapman had asked for like a report on it, or it was more just a discussion, amongst the commission and
That's
folks
a
on the
good-
report. So,
That's actually a
just
good
clarifying.
question.
At minimum,
Okay,
I think it would be handy if we individually read at least the executive summary
Okay.
of the report. That's a shorter version of the 200-page report.
right.
But then also to bring it to a meeting where we can discuss if there's any changes or any impacts that it has on our department.
So here's a technical question for Ray. If the report becomes available, we could either go out, reach out on our own and go get the report, or I'm wondering if that's something that the department could be proactive in forwarding out to all of the commissioners. But the problem is if it's prior to our actually agendizing it, if Ms. Nakamura pushes it out to the commissioners, all of the commissioners at the same time, would that be a Brown Act violation? It's a public report.
It would, based off the nature of the email
Okay,
exchange itself.
okay,
If we know the actual website it's going to be on, to be able to pull it, we can, during a meeting, just advise the commission of what that address would be. Is it off, like, maybe Burbank Police Department's website, the Ripper Report, or is it off of the DOJ?
Yeah, so Captain Cornelius did the legwork for us. So the report that was published in January of this year was the data from '22.
okay.
Yeah.
So we can expect January of '25 to be data from '23.
Okay, okay.
And I think we do a hyperlink, our folks are all over this stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a hyperlink to the report, and Mike Chapman is right, it's like 242 pages.
Yep.
So that's where we're at,
Okay.
okay?
So the recommendation is to add the Ripper Report review to the calendar for April. It sounds like folks are coming, I'm seeing consensus with that as well. I'm seeing not only consensus, I'm seeing 2 thumbs up from Mike Ellman. So let's go ahead and run with that. Any other calendar items that we want to add or change?
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Since we go to council for a joint meeting, I believe it's September,
Traditionally, yeah.
I know we had a little bit of a mix-up this year about speaking in terms of a group as to what you want to present to council.
Oh,
So it might be worth putting it on the annual calendar for July, August, so that you guys can have a discussion the meeting prior to figure out what issues you would like to bring up to council.
perfect.
That
Fan-
way, there's a
I-
placeholder.
I appreciate that. And so we do the year in review in June. It sounds like the recommendation is that we possibly add, July's been pretty busy with all the school stuff and everything and transition. So August may be a good time to do that, to prepare for that report. I really appreciate you making that recommendation. Are folks comfortable with adding preparation for the joint meeting to the August? Again, this is to the calendar. This is not actually agendizing it. Yeah, okay, we've got consensus there as well. Fantastic. Any other changes, removals, or additions to the proposed calendar? Mike makes the motion to accept the package with.
Second.
And we've got a second. We'll take Paul. He verbalized it, so we'll do that. But I'm going to let you be the first to vote on a yay for that, Mike. Is that a yes? Okay, all in favor? Any opposition? No opposition? Okay, Sherry, we've got that one wrapped up. Thank you for. It was actually Chapman and McKenna. Yeah, yeah. He beat him to it. Okay? He raised his hand. We're getting him to use his words. It's going pretty well.
All right. He was more polite than I was.
All right, that was item number G3. We're moving on to item number G4, which is the review of item G4, the review of trainings received by the ad hoc subcommittee to evaluate a mission vision statement. That one's me, and so I will just jump right in. I've got copies for folks here, and then what we'll do, actually, let me do this. I'm going to send these down this way. I'm going to send 2, 3, 4, 5 down that way. And Sherry, I'm going to have the stack down for anybody in the audience that wants that as well. What this is this is simply my notes from a meeting that was held back in July of 2024 with the executive team, which consisted of myself, Romick, and Mike Ellman. It was a good meeting to discuss our recollection of a training that took place in August of 2022 by the National League of Cities on implicit bias. This was a training that was required by the City Council of all boards and commissions in the city. There was also a second training, and let me see if I've got a date here. I'm not seeing the second date of the other training, but I think it was the prior year. And this was a training that was put on to talk about the mission, vision, and values of the various boards and commissions. And it was encouraging us to take a look at that and look at what might go beyond what the actual just city charter is. So with the National League of Cities implicit bias training, I'll just go through my notes very quickly. I was really pleased to see that one of my former professors, the one that actually directed me into social work, was one of my mentors was actually one of the subject matter experts in the video. The other video, and I believe this was from 2021, I believe, was Jim Uhl and providing a purpose statement that inspires and drives team performance. And in that, the training focused on defining roles of team members, creating a purpose statement as to the why we exist, talking about identifying guides that we can call heroes to action with specific purpose. So it's not just a matter of being on the dais, but actually how can we drive things? How can we drive action? And then he recommended the use of the story analogy with an opening, middle, and an end in terms of the work that we're doing. This is specifically tied to the work that we've been involved in with the ad hoc subcommittees, making sure that there's an opening, a why, there's a middle, there's the work that's being done, and then there's the end, which is the reporting out. So the National League of Cities training was focusing on looking at not just implicit bias, but how legislation and legislative bodies enact bias and discrimination. And I thought it was pretty eye-opening. So hopefully folks that attended that training remember that. So I've got included the charge from the municipal code of the city council here, which is pretty straightforward about what we're supposed to be doing. And we've talked a lot about civilian oversight, looking at law enforcement policies, and we're focusing on the greater good of the Burbank community. And how we do that is where we monitor the commission monitors. I actually wrote the commission monitors the Burbank Police Commission. It's actually the commission monitors the Burbank Police Department. There goes my notes, to achieve and maintain a culture of respect and professionalism through accountability and transparency in all of its actions. So then going through a lot of the material that we have available, both online and in the charter, our values seem to be focusing on independence, being objective, being professionally prepared, and having personal integrity in the work that they're doing. The work group that we had when we met in July, we talked about various tasks that we could take on. These were not assignments to the commission. These were things that Mike, Romick, and myself were talking about that we could do. Is we want to make the attempt to do the work. We don't want to just sit back and just have information provided to us. We want to be proactive. Mike, you demonstrated that earlier this evening by looking into, you're going to be doing some research on something and bringing it back. That's the spirit that we want to get into. We're here to learn. We need to orient ourselves. I think attendance at the NACOL conference is a big part of that. The police commission videos, this is what we were talking about before, and Ann, I think you actually volunteered your husband to participate in helping put together some videos for us as well, and I know Romick's capable of doing that as well. We want to continue to review department policies. We've been looking really hard at our own meeting process over the past couple of years. We want to lean more into community engagement. We've talked about website review and input. Going to the second page, What we want to do is we want to make sure that we're bringing constructive feedback back. And again, these all notes were from our conversation, the three of us. We want to bring constructive feedback and input back to our police commission meetings. Do the work outside, bring it back in here. I think I did this one because I'm the touchy-feely one, is we want to be in relationship with each other. This work matters, and how we interact with each other matters. We want to observe and engage, participate in community engagement. We want to talk to our neighbors, and you've done that a number of times, and Mike, I think you've been actively involved in that too, so we appreciate that and want to make sure we include it. Potential-wise is we want to further the mission of the department to promote public safety for all residents, and we want to inspire advocacy. We might actually, in turn, lead other groups to do similar work. We want potential projects include neighborhood meetings, review of the annual community survey, advocate for the needs of the community, and evaluate current resources. So those are all of the notes that were put together. The framework that Jim Uhl was recommending around building a purpose statement is there's the what, which is really the charge from the municipal code. There's the how, and how we're going to get that done, and then there's the why. So what I'd like to do is, I've talked a lot, and I apologize for that. I'd like to hear from all of you. First off, let's do this. Are folks interested in developing a purpose statement for the police commission?
Doesn't one exist that's provided by the city council?
That's the reason I'm bringing up the question, because that's the mission that's provided in the city charter. And so the training was encouraging us, the training that the city council had us all attend was encouraging us to go beyond that. So that's the very first question. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because there was even question whether we should even be having this discussion in the first place. So that's this could start or end this right here if folks wanted to.
I guess I'll hit the hammer on the head.
Okay.
What are we doing wrong, and what are we trying to correct?
Paul?
I think this discussion should include our two representatives of the city council, whether it be in an ad hoc on the side or whether it be through written communication. I think that the two representatives of the council should be included.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
At least one of them is not changing. But that's true.
Okay.
Actually, Mike, that's a very valid point. I think we should readdress this in January with the two people who are assigned to represent, to work with us, so that we're all on the same page moving forward.
So how that might look, Ray, I'm looking at you on this one. We would have to do it in public meeting. We'd have to comply with the Brown Act. This would involve presumably asking our liaisons to participate in one of the meetings that we would agendize this at, correct? Okay. Mike?
Okay, I'm going to go back in time. There used to be a time where the council liaisons would speak to us directly at the police commission meetings. And a previous mayor didn't think that was a good idea. So that ended that. But I think we should go back to that when the police chief gives his comments, if we have a council liaison present, we should give them the opportunity to speak also. They don't have to speak, but give them the opportunity.
Mike?
I think it would be a good time to hear from our attorney here.
So my first concern is we have a charter established by council, approved by the voters, right? We can establish a mission statement that encompasses the charter itself, the authority that the police commission has. The term going beyond the charter concerns me a little bit in terms of implying that we're going to go beyond the powers vested in the police commission.
Right.
I think a better way to term it is a purpose statement to help achieve success for the police commission of some sort that integrates certain key elements that you want to focus on within the community. I think that's what you're trying to do, not go beyond the charter.
Let me take you back to the Jim Uhl training, and the full title's there. It was building a purpose statement that inspires and drives team performance. So I think that does a good job capturing that. I don't think we need to change the language of the training
Okay.
title itself. But this is what we've done is we've changed our process the past few years in terms of how we're operating. I personally think we're doing a lot of this, and that's where the conversation was in June. It's about memorializing that, about going, and it's when I say going beyond the charter, it's not adding any additional responsibilities. It's really memorializing how we want to be with each other in doing the work that we're doing. And I think that was the purpose of the training.
I like that explanation.
Okay.
That's agreeable.
Okay. So with that, I'm hearing a recommendation that we want to invite our liaisons into that discussion. That was the concern, I think, Mike, that you had raised, is there a concern, does council have a concern about that invitation or no?
Did the council, I don't know my history there, did the council pass anything saying that representative liaisons cannot speak directly to?
I was informed that there was a concern at some point in the past. I'd have to speak to my colleagues regarding that issue. You can invite the liaisons here. They don't have an obligation to speak if they don't feel comfortable. And we can agendize this issue for a future meeting.
Okay.
Notify them to request their presence, and then we can discuss it at that point. If they go too far in terms of a certain legal issue, I can stop the conversation.
I think Mike was going a little broader too, of not just this one particular item. It was at any time during the year that the.
I would make a suggestion, kind of like note and file this, because I think this is like a really good plan. But I think we should continue the plan instead of trying to knock it out now, because I think we're really going in the right direction, and I would like further input.
So a note and file would actually be to note and file it away.
Yeah, but
Whereas
we can bring it back.
agendizing a future agenda item to invite our liaisons, it would be a little bit different.
Can we say note and file till January?
Now we're getting into semantics that go beyond what I'm capable of defining. Again, social worker brain, so I can't quite go there. So if we were just to simply want to there's a recommendation for January, and I'm looking back at our calendar to see where we're at. We need to talk about January items. On January, it's the DUI enforcement and the military equipment report discussion. So it's not too heavy of a load right now, but we also haven't gotten to agendizing other items yet. But I'm hearing the recommendation from Paul to go ahead.
But this is revisiting January, not for the report in January.
This conversation.
The can we, the how, the can we, and if we can, how. Not necessarily getting into the weeds.
If we can, what?
Well, if we can invite the city council members that have agreed to be our liaisons, and if they would be interested in helping us to change this, or if they just said, no, you're not changing it, then it's a moot point.
Changing what?
The statement, our mission statement.
We're not changing that.
Okay,
That's not on the table. That's not on the table. This is about developing a purpose statement that would go alongside the mission statement to talk about how we inspire and drive team performance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's.
Okay. Yeah, the whole piece about the charge to the municipal code and everything, we don't want to mess with the municipal code at all, and can't.
So I think we can invite the liaisons to be present. The concern is obviously if they opine on any issues that may come off as the position of the council, which we do not want that to happen. And so they can be here in a liaison role.
Okay.
And if they have any input, they can provide input as the liaison for the police commission. But ultimately, it would be up to the commission to develop whatever statement they want us to develop.
Okay.
Whatever goal or direction they want to pursue their status moving forward, which I'll leave that up to you, whether you want to kick that to January, try to resolve it today.
Yeah.
That's up to you guys.
And then, so if I heard correctly, you said that we can subpoena our liaisons and we can call for objections when we bring them here. That's not it? Okay.
No.
Okay. All right. I'm having some fun with that. But it sounds like the recommendation, and I want to make sure that we're clear, and we'll find out who's motioning and seconding this. The recommendation is to, is in essence, to table this to January, to invite our liaisons into the discussion around the development of a purpose statement.
I would second that.
I'm going to actually let you, if you're good with it, I'm going to let you motion it. Oh, go ahead. Any comments?
I was just going to say, if it's really, we're not agendizing it because we want to find out if council maybe feels strongly that we shouldn't pursue this for whatever reason, is that the question? Like,
City
is that-
council or
We have the
attorney
same vision.
council?
We're pursuing the same vision they are.
Right, so I wonder just for, if somebody from the commission could just reach out to council
I can
in the
do that as
meantime,
well.
and just, it doesn't have to be you, but just, reach
Yeah.
out about that and answer that question, and
Yep.
then we can always, we could
Yeah.
agendize it now and always take it off the agenda,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You can do that as well, but.
And I'm moving forward with this with the assumption that they had us go through the training with the intent or the expectation that we were actually going to follow through with it. Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
think
So-
maybe that's a quicker way to answer this question that we have versus agendizing to ask the question at.
Well, no. The agendizing would actually be to have the conversation, but I can work in advance on reaching out to our liaisons about that. Does that make sense? So this is where we have to create the agenda piece. We actually have to create the space to have the conversation, or else we have to create the space to have the conversation about having the conversation. And I don't want to do that again.
Right, that's what I was
Yeah.
trying to avoid. That's
Mike?
what I thought we were saying.
I think it really comes down to when are they going to be available?
Sure. Okay. So let's do this. It sounds like I've got a motion by Paul to tentatively move this to January with an invitation to our city council liaisons. And then I have for the creation of a purpose statement. You got it. And then I have a second from Mike Ellman. He got up there first. Everybody in favor? Aye, or raise your hands.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. There we go. Quick process question. We just created an agenda item for January outside of the agenda item that focuses on future agenda items. Was that okay? We did it already, so it's done, but I want to make sure it's okay.
Technically, it has to be at the time when we're recommending
Okay.
future agenda items, but
Okay.
I think it's fine right now.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate you.
Let's move
All
this-
right.
We can move it along.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to go. All right, so we're going ahead and moving on to, this is item number G5. This is general announcements by the police chief. Brief announcements regarding upcoming events and/or items of note related to the police department. Chief,
So
welcome
good evening, Commissioners, and I will be very brief, but I just want to acknowledge Sergeant Loffer and Detective Kyles, their PowerPoint, their presentation, the knowledge of their position in the organization. I just give them really high marks. So they're a reflection of our whole organization. So high marks for them. This Friday night, Holiday in the Park. The department's going to have the Bearcat out there. The 49 classic police car will be out on display. We'll have some of our SWAT officers, community resource officers that will be available, meet and greet, engage with the community, and it's also a great recruitment opportunity and photo ops for the kids. On Saturday, December 7th, is this will be the third gun buyback, and that'll be from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., rain or shine. $100 gift card for handguns, rifles, and shotguns, and $200 gift cards for assault weapons. That's Saturday, December 7th, 9 to 12. Then on Wednesday, we will have Shop with a Cop, and that's in collaboration with Burbank Housing, Burbank Police Foundation, the BPOA, Kiwanis, Rotary, and Walmart, and it will be at Walmart from 4:30 Tuesday, December 11th. So we made some promotions. I already shared with you Lieutenant Loffer, but our SRO, School Resource Officer, Kiyomi Roberts was promoted to detective. Paul French, a detective, was promoted to sergeant. Sergeant Loffer was promoted to lieutenant. And Mark Stoll, Lieutenant Stoll, who oversees our IA Bureau, will be the commanding officer of the Patrol Bureau. Captain Cornelius will do a sideways move and become the administrative services captain. And Captain Lasacco will go to support services. So that's it.
Chief, appreciate that. Before you go,
Yeah.
this isn't open for a big discussion, but I just want to acknowledge, I believe this is actually officially your last police commission meeting. Officially. My understanding is that you may be going into an interim role, not an interim role, but you'll be carrying on until a new chief is selected. But
Yeah, so I'm letting my time run to the end of February.
Okay.
And until the new chief is selected, actually, Captain Cornelius will be the acting chief of police beginning sometime in January.
Okay.
And then he'll be in and out, and I'll be in and out. So there is a chance, and I look forward to it, that I may be here either in January or February, depending on schedules.
so this may be your last meeting as the actual chief. You'll be carrying Captain Cornelius. Sounds like we'll be carrying some of that workload as well, starting
It'll
in January.
be shared workload.
So with that, one of the things that we did is we did this without violating the Brown Act, but we prepared something for you and actually for Captain Kremens, who unfortunately is not able to be here with us tonight.
Right.
We have a couple of gifts over here on the side that we wanted to present you both with. You are a tool guy, so we got something reflective of that. Yeah, and Captain Kremens is a book guy, so we got something reflective of
Captain
that.
Kremens is
Definitely a book guy.
Voracious reader. This was very kind of you folks and totally unnecessary. But between Captain Kremens and myself, we have over 105 years of public service.
Yep. Yeah, and we appreciate all that. We hope that you enjoy retirement. We hope to be able to still be in touch with you periodically. We promise not to bother you. Maybe. We will try not to bother you too much. So what they are is they're basically just little kind of like boxes, tchotchke boxes, if you will. They keep random stuff in. A couple partner departments in the area. Folks, we've had conversations with other departments. They're aware of both you and Captain Kremens, and just appreciate the public service that both of you have given. So you'll find some items that come from a couple of departments in the area where people speak highly of you as well.
Very, very kind of you.
We appreciate you.
So, and it's been a privilege. I can't overstate it. I mean, this has been the highlight of my career. It really has. When I came here in April 19th, 2010, thought it was going to be 6 months. So fast forward almost 15 years, and here I am, and it's been great. And the community has been welcoming, and I love serving this community.
Fantastic.
So if I was 15 or 20 years younger, I would stay another 15 or 20 years, but that is not the case. So Thank you all.
Thank you. And Captain Cornelius, we look forward to working with you as well, and we're available to you for anything that you need. So thank you. All right, with that, we're moving on to item H, which is introduction of agenda items for future meetings. We currently have, let me go ahead and bring the calendar back up to have it. We've got one agenda item that we've already identified, and that is the conversation with our city council liaisons around a purpose statement for the police commission. We also, Sherry, the things that are in parentheses, are those already agendized and we just need, okay, so we also have in January a presentation and discussion of the city's 2035 general plan and how it relates to the Burbank Police Department. We have two other items that are on the that are on the calendar, but they are not agendized yet. That is the DUI enforcement review and the military equipment report discussion. This takes place before the military equipment community engagement meeting. So we've got two items on there already. We've got two items that are on the calendar. We need to open it up to the commission to make motions about the two items on the calendar and any other items that you have that you wanted to address. Paul, go ahead.
Following our last meeting when I mentioned electric vehicles, electric two-wheeled vehicles. E-bikes. I was told that it was something that Vice Mayor Perez had already brought up. Well, at a recent Veterans Baseball game
So
at Burbank.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we're not allowed to really discuss.
All right, well,
we're not allowed to discuss the items, but you can make a recommendation for an item.
I think that it's time to make a recommendation for that item. There are things coming up in social media, and I understand there was also some vandalism done with, up on the Bell Golf Course.
I'm going to get you there. So it sounds like
Okay.
you're making a motion to,
The motion would be to, I don't know, how are we going to regulate electric vehicles, period? And going back to my initial thing, which is sidewalks.
so I want to be real specific because there's a lot of electric vehicles out there. So you're making
Electric bicycles.
you're making a motion to regulate, to discuss the regulation of electric bicycles in Burbank.
Yes.
I got that?
Should that be,
We're going to use the formal process. Do I have a second for that?
Can we?
Well, no. We'll get there in a moment. I'm trying to. Mike seconds. So Mike Chapman seconds it. Now we can open it up for discussion about the can we piece. So what your question to Ray is?
Can we?
Have a discussion about e-bike regulation in the city of Burbank.
That would,
Okay.
Just understand that we have a first step report from the city council on this very topic.
Okay.
So actually, this works well for both of us because we can maybe preview it for police commission before we finalize it with the city council
Okay.
and show a collaboration.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion. We have a second. We have the motion. We have the second. Any other questions related to the agenda item itself, Mike?
To expand the definition of what an e-bike is, I saw in Glen Oaks a few days ago an electric bike with no pedals. I don't know what that is considered.
You beat me to the punch.
So to include electric bikes with no pedals? Perfect, including scooters.
Yes.
We might as well go the whole way, and there's
Can we include unicycles in that as?
cycle type things that are electric, yeah.
So I'm hearing a call for the unicycle and for electric
That's why
skateboards?
Electrified.
Tried to be as broad as I could in my initial description because,
Per-
even even going as far as in an acting contract, it used to say film and television. And then they didn't have to pay him for VCR because that was nothing. To make a long story short, now it says in all future technologies. So that as things develop, it's included. And I have to say that there's some degree of all future technologies that we may want to consider in here because, like I said, when I was 12 years old, my mini bike was taken away from me and it was a Honda 50 little scooter that I see on the roads now.
Can I make the recommendation of defining this as personal electric vehicles? No?
Except four-wheel vehicles.
More
Unlicensed
specific?
personal electric vehicles.
Unlicensed personal electric vehicles? We're trying to capture all.
We can do electric scooters and e-bikes at this point. I think that's fair, because I think the regulations that are either new or upcoming would be addressing the e-bikes and scooters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we start with scooters and e-bikes and
We're
yeah.
also working with the state too, or
Okay.
State folks are looking into. So this is nationwide, but region-wide for us.
Okay.
It's something that we're all looking at.
Great.
Because you have 3 levels of bikes, you
Yeah.
have pedal assisted, and they go all the way up. But yes.
Perfect. So Sherry, thank you for putting up with us as we put this together. So the agenda item is motioned by Paul, seconded by Mike Ellman, is to focus on electric scooters and electric e-bikes and scooters in January. Paul?
May we ask the chief what month would be appropriate? Because he says, it sounds like they're already in the works.
Well, the recommendation was January. He was pretty excited about that.
John started it yet?
I'm sure he started. Marcus will be carrying it across the finish line. I don't know what month that is scheduled for.
Let's do this so that we don't push it. Let's do a preliminary draft report out.
Okay.
In January.
Perfect.
Okay?
Perfect. Sherry, do you have all that? Yes. Okay, so now we can go back to all in favor of this agenda item, aye? Or say yes? Any opposition? No abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you for that. Other agenda items for Leila, go ahead.
Well, not for, it seems like January's got a lot going on.
Okay.
At this point, but I would like to recommend adding a review of the active transportation safety data analysis findings that I am working on.
Sure.
And discussion, like
I heard-
review and discussion of those results.
I heard actor transportation?
Active.
Active transportation.
Pedestrian, cyclist.
So pedestrian and
umbrella.
cyclist transportation safety. Yeah,
Yes.
this is the, so this
Yeah.
is this the report out?
Yes.
Okay, so this is.
discussion.
Okay, so report out and discussion of the
Potential votes.
ad hoc
Yeah.
public the ad hoc,
Maybe its official name, ad hoc traffic safety.
the ad hoc
maybe
traffic
something-
safety committee.
It's-
And what month do you want to do that in?
Well, maybe February?
Um,
I know that's also the military equipment.
Yep, military equipment.
Meeting, but-
And those are two separate meetings. So we've got the military equipment meeting itself.
And then our own meeting.
And then we've
after,
got our meeting
right?
on homeless engagement after
Yeah,
that, so.
maybe if we don't have anything else.
Okay, so the motion is for February?
Yes.
To have that report out of that ad hoc subcommittee?
Yes.
Do I have a second? A second? Any comment on that? Are we good with that? Cool. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous as well. Great. Any other future agenda items? Mike, go ahead.
I'd like to have a presentation and just, thank you.
You're welcome.
Presentation discussion on narcotics. In reviewing the daily arrest logs, I would say generally speaking, the majority of the arrests include controlled substances. It goes, paraphernalia, it goes on and on.
Okay.
So I would like to have the discussion on narcotics as it relates to arrests in the city.
Okay, and so that's the motion. Do you have a recommendation for when that would be?
I would say to move it further out to maybe May.
Okay, so alongside the mental health update?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a motion to address narcotics. Paul?
I'll second it.
Paul seconds it. Any discussion?
I'd like to, if it's possible, to include the origin. In other words, are these things coming in from Burbank, or are there things that are happening in Burbank?
Okay,
So, I mean, a lot of the arrest reports should say that has a home address, so we know that they're not necessarily Burbank residents, but they're getting arrested here. So I'd like to know how much of the problem is coming in or how much of the problem is homegrown.
is that something that can be included by the department without having to provide it? Okay, great. It's good. Excellent. It's there. So we have a motion, we have a motion by Mike, we have a second by Paul. All in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous as well, and that's in May. Any other agenda items?
Just to be clear, the ones that are on our calendar, do they automatically go into?
They do not. So the DUI enforcement and the military equipment report discussion both need to be motioned this evening if we're going to do that in January. Motion. Do I hear you wanting to motion one of those?
That's what I'd like to make a motion for, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
make sure that we have it included.
We'll do one at a time. So there's a motion to include DUI enforcement review in January. Do I have a second? Leila has a second. All in favor? Aye. Any oppositions? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay, so the DUI enforcement item will be added to January. The last one is the military equipment report discussion. Do we have anybody motioning to include that in January?
Does this work with their guys?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pattern that we put together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
so I need a motion. I'll take Leila. Do I have a second? Paul? All in favor, say aye or raise hands. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous for that as well. So any other agenda items that we want to add at this time?
I think it can be just part of probably the crime review or crime stats review that we put on the calendar, which I know is not yet agendized, but it's on the calendar for, I think we said June? Or, no, sorry, April, March? Sorry. But given, folks mentioned here, and I hear it, we all hear it, I think, concerned about retail crime. So I'm wondering if we want to agendize a specific discussion around that, or on just a review of,
Very good.
what does that look like?
Do you want to go ahead and make that in the form of an agenda item? So you're going to motion to agendize?
I motion to agendize a review, or I guess maybe a presentation on retail crime and, discussion around that.
So we have a motion to agendize motion to agendize a presentation and discussion on retail theft crime, or retail theft crime? Retail theft crime?
theft crime.
Okay, retail theft crime.
Yeah.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Ann. We're going to open up for discussion real quick. Mike?
I would like to delay that, because in the last election, they changed the California law which should have some type of an effect on retail crime. So I would like to wait a little longer to see what the new law, which I think goes into effect January 1, if anything has changed.
Appreciate that. I also want to lift up that we just had a presentation on retail theft, and having just had that presentation, I'm hesitant to create another agenda item for that.
Why don't we
Immediately.
seek to put it in March or April then?
So I don't know if we want to, we can do that later,
Okay.
but because we just had it, I don't know if it's a good use of our time to go ahead and agendize that right now for a future meeting. Mike?
I was just going to suggest October, because there should be enough data in by October. And we're through with the school stuff, and
Do you want to agendize that tonight, or do you want to hold off on that right now
I'll
to see
hold
how things
off,
unfold?
but I think we should do it, but I think the longer we wait, the more data is available.
Okay, so to close this item out then, we've got a motion, we've got a second. Follow me here. All in favor of agendizing the retail theft agenda item, say aye. Aye.
Particular date?
We don't have a date yet. I want to make sure,
For
folks.
future meetings.
I want to make sure folks hear this. So agendizing now for a future meeting, and I have all in favor of agendizing now
Aye.
for a future meeting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any opposition? I oppose. Any abstentions? No abstentions? Okay, so that's going to be agendized for a future meeting, so it's just going to go at the bottom. Okay. Any other items? Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead. It was motioned by Leila, seconded by Ann. Thank you. So with that, our next meeting date is going to be Wednesday, January 15th, 2025, right here, 6 p.m. in the City Council chamber. We are dark in December. And with that, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.